Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel, and today I have a very different video for you today. I am for the first time trying to do a cast video. I always kind of feel a little bit self-conscious when creating these videos, just purely because you're creating Sims and I always feel under judgment when I'm doing this sort of thing, and I like cast, but I'm mainly a builder, so that's kind of why I've never really... I dabble, obviously I do cast and I do enjoy doing it, but at the same time, like, I've never really done a video for it. I'm still in the heart of my dissertation at the moment, but I thought I'd bring a little bit of that to a video in what I wanted to produce in this video. As you probably can tell by the title, I wanted to bring a very queer sort of aesthetic to the Sims that I was creating. I created 5 Sims, and what I wanted from these Sims was to, coming from the Moschino stuff pack, I wanted to have, as I said, a very queer aesthetic to this sort of, these sorts of Sims. And I thought, because at the moment I'm doing my dissertation on gender representation in the 1970s gay liberation movement, I wanted to bring a little bit of that into this and sort of bring the two together, because I felt at the moment quite separated from YouTube and from social media, just purely because I spend so much time on writing my dissertation. So I thought at first I would start with not a little definition, but sort of anybody who isn't sure of what like queer means, or not understanding on where that is coming from in these sorts of representations of Sims. But kind of in the 1980s and 1990s, queer sort of grew in the academic and in Western culture. It first started out in the 1970s, or prior to that, as a derogatory term for homosexuality or effeminacy, and kind of the gay liberation movements of the 1970s began to reject the term queer and preferred to use the term gay, and they kind of claimed that term to represent what they saw as their liberational politics. But by the late 1980s and 1990s, queer was also kind of retaken by the new sort of politics that was growing in at that time, with groups such as Queer Nation, who were practicing kind of a politics of provocation, which was kind of, they were not trying to look for an assimilation, but asserting kind of an in-your-face difference and a definite defiant separatism. Queer has allowed for anybody kind of to become, it's kind of come an identity category in itself. Individuals who wanted to label themselves with a non-label, who wanted to be fluid or inclusive in their own stated desires, or wanted to challenge hegemonic assumptions of sexuality, kind of decided to describe themselves as queer. And this kind of falls into the idea of kind of non-conformist gender representation, gender identities, gay men, lesbian women, transgender people, anybody non-binary, anybody who kind of felt that they weren't included in sort of heteronormative, it's a difficult word to say, heteronormative sort of society and society values. So I wanted to bring that into The Sims in kind of what I thought could be represented through clothing, through creating different Sims, through representations and stuff like that. And I wanted to do it with the Moschino stuff pack, just purely because it's quite a high fashion brand, and I thought that bringing it into sort of this queer aesthetic. And I created 5 different Sims. I have transgender man, transgender woman, a woman who chooses to wear more masculine clothing, and a gay male who chooses to kind of experiment in his sort of wardrobe and picking between non-male and masculine sort of clothing, and sort of playing on the performativity of gender. And I'm sure you're wondering, why am I talking about gender as a performance? So kind of like the founding, if you want to use it as that word, of queer theory came from a theorist called Judith Butler, who kind of analysed gender in a way at seeing it as a performance, which has led to sort of certain codes being used more than others, which has created this heteronormative sort of attitude to gender, because certain performance elements to masculinity and femininity keep being reoccurred in representations of men and in women, which has led to this sort of splitting of the genders, if you want, or representations, if you want it. It's like, I'm still very new in this sort of field, and I'm trying my best to think of the best words to talk about this, because at the end of the day, I am a cisgendered white male, and when I'm talking about representations of gender in transgender people and in women, obviously I come from a position of privilege to talk about these situations, so it is obviously trying to watch my words here in the best way possible. So that is what I really wanted to come into this sort of thing, and kind of talk about the possibilities of representations of non-conformist gender identities in The Sims. And with The Sims 4, I mean, Plumbella, for example, has made a fantastic video on the history of sexuality in The Sims, and I really think that she did really well in discussing those sorts of topics. I will link the video in the description down below, but I was kind of thinking about ways at which The Sims could further representations of queer identities. So for example, when you're picking a Sim, you can choose what sort of clothing they would prefer to wear, whether it's masculine or feminine. And I think what they could do is just have a box at the bottom which says neither, on somebody who wants to kind of play about with both and that sort of thing. And I think that could work well on furthering representations of people who want to pick both. And I don't know if it's with the custom content, but these Sims aren't on the gallery yet, but I was playing about with some custom content when I was making these Sims, and I struggled to I don't know how they've made it, because I don't understand how custom content works, but I struggle to find some items for my transgender Sims, despite them being, because they were masculine with a feminine frame, or feminine with a male with a feminine frame, they still constituted to being a man. So I don't know how the custom content was created, that they limited it only to women or to the female gender, and I struggled to pick some items of custom content because I wanted to use a certain lipstick on, for example, my transgender Sim who is on the screen right now, and I couldn't find those items. So it's about trying to just remove those sorts of boundaries at which you're limiting other people's representation. So yeah, I think The Sims has really come a huge way in allowing people to represent different genders and different within certain limits, and I think that's brilliant on the fact that it allows you to create a transgender Sim on the fact that we're not TERFs here, we're not excluding transgender Sims on the fact that you can pick the male or the female, and I think that is brilliant on the fact. I think there could be options to add non-binary on the fact that you don't pick a gender, but I mean, I don't have enough time to get into the whole politics of non-binarism because I don't have time for that. So I think it could be a feature which is included, but it's difficult ground, and they do allow that on the fact that you can be masculine and pick feminine clothing, but I think to further that non-binarism, you could just say, I have a clothing preference of neither, and I think that would allow sort of different representations. And I think I'm trying to think of where else I want this to go, but yeah, so I think I've said my piece. And I think it's brilliant that you can have these sort of representations of gender as a sort of a performative aspect, and that people can choose how their Sims are represented and dressed. But I think it could be furthered, as I probably repeated many times, saying that they could have no clothing preference, because as a sort of ease thing when I was trying to create the kind of the male sim who was mixing their clothing between masculine and feminine. Because their clothing preference is masculine, I have to keep removing the label of feminine or masculine to find the feminine clothes, and that happened every single time. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but at the same time, like, you have to then search for the female clothes, and some obviously don't fit masculine frames, and it's about trying to find that sort of in between that gives you that freedom to pick non-conformity over conformity. So yeah, I hope you all like these sims. They do have custom content in them because I thought that gave a little bit more. I think the only reason I was going to use custom content was because they had nicer makeup, basically. I don't really have much custom content in my game, but it just allowed for a certain elevation, I guess, to some of these looks. Because with the Moschino stuff, I feel like it was just ended up being a high-end Loft stuff pack with a Moschino stamped on the front with a few nice pieces of clothing, and I do feel like I did that sort of what sort of clothing is it? It's like the faux sort of shirt which looked a little bit like a clown piece. It's an awful looking piece of clothing, but I actually think I did quite well on this. I gave it to this sim, who she's in my head she is pansexual. To keep up with the representation here, and I used I think it was Grim Cookies and Deligrissy's pants that came in their collaboration pack, and I thought it worked out nicely. I thought it looked quite good in the end, and I was giving her another look here. I couldn't remember if it was masculine or feminine. There you go, it was those pants, but I wasn't sure about it in the end, so I just stuck with the ones that came with the Deligrissy stuff pack. So yeah, hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you either learn a little bit about queer history, about queer theory, and the importance of these sorts of representations. I kind of gave each sim here a catwalk. In there, I gave them all 3 different outfits, but I've given them, this is showcasing their one main outfit, which was on the thumbnail. That took me exceedingly long to create, but I gave them all a catwalk because I thought it looked quite cute and was quite cool to see their full outfits, because even with like the photography thing, you're still only seeing a little bit of their outfit, so it's good to see like the full thing. And I created a whole sort of like, you know, catwalk and represented them all in their wonderful outfits. So hope you all have enjoyed this video. I hope to be back building soon, but finding time to stare at a computer longer than I already am trying to write a dissertation is proving much more difficult than I thought it would be. But yeah, so I hope you all have enjoyed this video. I will speak to you all in the next video, and I will see you all soon. Thank you guys and girls and whoever, and all those non-binary people who choose not, all those queer people. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!